So I'm not into fashion. Fashion's pretty superficial when we have pretty big problems we need to solve, right? Don't you think? Well, we don't fund fashion. We don't finance fashion. If the fashion industry has a problem, it's because they're making too much stuff. So why don't you get them to solve that problem first? I'm Louis Perkins, and I am the president at the Apparel Impact Institute, a global organization whose mission is to identify, fund, scale, and measure solutions to address environmental issues facing the textile, apparel, and footwear sector. So let's talk a little bit about fashion. The textile, apparel, and footwear sector, also known as the fashion industry, contributes between 2 to 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions, depending on which report you're referencing. I'll tell you about ours later. As of 2020, the fashion industry uses over 79 trillion liters of water every year, which is about 4% of global freshwater extraction globally. And this isn't only coming from cotton farming production, it's also coming from dyeing and finishing and treating fabrics. So while cotton used to dominate the materials that are used in fashion, today it's primarily synthetics. In fact, would you be surprised to know that over 75% of apparel materials are coming from fossil fuel, petroleum-based materials? And this isn't, so also 85% of the materials are sent to landfill. So we know there's a problem with this whole system, But fashion also employs over 450 million people globally in the making of our clothes, and over 75% of those garment workers are women. Our work aims to address and support the climate action that's happening in the field, in those factories, in those small, medium enterprises, family-owned businesses, helping them to be resilient and part of economic development in their countries as they continue to produce our global apparel. So 15 years ago, it was really companies like Patagonia, Eileen Fisher, maybe Stella McCartney that were leading the sustainability, headlines, with a lot of other small, medium enterprise brands that were authentically sustainable but struggling to stay in business. But today, if you look at the sustainability charters of some of the largest companies, multinationals, there's some pretty significant investments and impact that's being made by most every publicly traded company, and they're signing up to science-based targets initiatives. They're part of the UNFCCC's Fashion Charter or Macron's Fashion Pact out of Paris. So there's a tremendous amount of commitments and strategies that are being set in place. But I'll tell you, most of them have no clue how they're going to get there. And this industry has agreed to lower their CO2 emissions by 45% by 2030. And it's also an industry that's growing. So, enter Apparel Impact Institute. We were launched in 2018, so just 5 years ago, by Target, Gap, PVH, IDH, the Sustainable Trade Initiative, HSBC Bank, and NRDC, National Resource Defense Council. 5 years later, we work with over 50 brand retailers and hundreds of suppliers on accelerating solutions in the supply chain. We work in the supply chains of China, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, South Korea, Italy, and the US, and we will be growing to more regions in the coming months and years. Our mission, as I said, is to identify, fund, scale, and measure proven solutions to address the most critical environmental issues. And today we're focusing on climate. We're also focusing on the supply chain, where over 97% of the CO2 carbon emissions are coming from that Scope 3, the brand retailer Scope 3 emissions. And it's also not just about carbon. The solutions that we seek to scale are addressing water, chemistry, land use, issues that impact biodiversity. So it's important that we don't just fund and scale solutions that are addressing CO2 emissions, but we look at a more holistic opportunity. We estimate that it's $1 trillion opportunity to decarbonize the fashion industry by 2050. So what are we doing about it? Well, exactly a year ago this week, I was in Copenhagen launching the Fashion+Climate Fund, which is a $250 million fund with our initial lead partners coming from Target, PVH, Lululemon, H&M, also with the H&M family, the Pearson's Family Foundation, and Wendy and Eric Schmidt through the 11th Hour Project have started this fund, and it will be raised and deployed over the next 7 years as catalytic capital. So this is the grant-making engine to support those facilities, the ventures, the solutions, the programs that are helping to decarbonize. You don't just get grant or subsidy funding if you get pulled into our climate solutions portfolio. You now get put into an accelerator. And so for that, we're partnering with another $1.75 billion in debt and equity in order to scale these solutions. HSBC was the first to really help us develop this program. They helped us put together the $1 trillion opportunity report, which I'll be happy to share with you all. And so based on that, we're now attracting more banks, development banks, as well as impact investors, equity investors, and also philanthropies who want to participate not just in the catalytic grant-making side of it, but also in potentially being part of blended capital deployment with first loss tranches and other unique ways we can launch financial tools. So our climate solutions portfolio, which we've just launched this spring, and we're going to announce the first grantees and programs we're bringing into the portfolio in the next couple weeks, is focusing on 6 key levers, and we lay that out in a report called The Carbon Roadmap to Net Zero for the fashion industry, which we wrote with the World Resource Institute. Those 6 levers address 3 on energy, which is renewable thermal heat or dry processing thermal heat technologies, renewable electricity and energy efficiency, and then 3 that are focused on materials, which is material efficiency, which is a lot of circular economy, as well as advanced technologies of equipment for material resource efficiency, as well as next generation materials and preferred materials, those made with recycled content, those that are made with lower carbon impact, as well as water, chemistry, et cetera. So we're looking primarily at mid to late stage because we want to get solutions that are ready to scale. There's a number of interesting accelerators out there right now that are giving prize money and working on early stage, and we think that's great. We're the continuum. We're the last mile towards scalability, so we can get these technologies and solutions commercial and get them scaled globally. And so if they're not yet ready to be scaled, we can also give grant dollars to help pilot them, to test them in this industry. And that's true for a lot of solutions that are in other industrial applications, but maybe not yet in textile. Maybe they're being used in regenerative ag and other types of crops, but they're not yet being used in cotton. So these are the types of things we can also apply funding towards. And also, if they don't have good data, and we find a lot of the solutions out there come to us with great business plans, and maybe they've even been well funded, but they don't actually have verified CO2 emission data. So we are helping them support that so that their data can actually go back to the retailer, the suppliers, as they report back to the retailers on verified carbon emission reduction towards science-based targets. So examples of the solutions we're looking for, I kind of mentioned in those levers, but it's energy efficiency solutions, renewable thermal heat, dry processing, anything that helps eliminate the use of coal on site or in the grid locally. Battery storage, concentrated solar, accelerating renewable electricity adoption, as I mentioned, regenerative ag, which is also going to have impacts on fertilizer and other lower carbon emitting materials that are used in production. So next month, as I mentioned, we're going to announce the first tranche of these climate solutions portfolios. So, join me. I'll get you on the mailing list, and you can see that. We also recognized in the first call for proposals, we didn't get a lot of the things we wanted. So we're reaching out to funds, to accelerators, to other agencies that are looking at these types of same solutions and how we might apply these things to the fashion industry. So we're going to put out a second RFP with more grant-making dollars in the fall. And also this fall, we're going to be launching our working groups for financial tools. So I mentioned earlier, we're building this $2 billion ecosystem with foundations, philanthropists, banks, equity investors, development banks. And so we're putting together these working groups now with support from the Rockefeller Foundation and HSBC Bank. We'll be launching that at Climate Week in New York. We'd invite anyone who's interested to learn more about it and even join the working groups if you see yourself in it. So if you have solutions in this area that are working, or you're funding or financing these types of transitions, we'd like you to work with us in aligning and deploying these solutions and the $2 billion in equity. to signal the market, because 2 billion is not the 1 trillion I said before that we need to deploy by 2050 around this scalability. So we are taking this first initial $2 billion ecosystem to deploy, and we will be building and growing it beyond that. And we're also working with companies like I mentioned, Target, but also Amazon, who are seeking to have us take this model into other product categories beyond just textiles. So we're creating this ecosystem that we think is scalable in other areas. So if you're interested in learning more, I also have 2 reports that I can share with you. I mentioned the $1 trillion opportunity report, and the other one is the report we wrote with WRI on the roadmap to decarbonize the fashion sector. I'm here for the next couple of days with all of you, so I look forward to meeting you all and sharing more. Thanks.